the name of the values that keep you alive, do not let your vision of man be distorted by the ugly, the cowardly, the mindless, and those who have never achieved his title. Do not lose your knowledge that man's proper estate is an upright posture, an intransigent mind, and a step that travels on limited roads. Do not let your fire go out. Spark might be replaced with a spark, and the hopeless swamps of the approximate, the not quite, the not yet, the not at all. The world you desired can be won. It exists. It is real. It is possible. It's yours.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Crypto Economy Podcast. I'm here with Zach from Mineful to talk a little bit about mining. So thanks for being here, Zach.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
So to get started, could you just give us a little background about why you wanted to start this project, what you thought it was going to solve within specific industries and specific parts of, I guess, infrastructure that seems to not be touched on very much. So a lot of our listeners have heard me talk a lot about mining, and I don't think a lot of other people talk about mining. So I was really excited when I saw you guys and what you were doing, because I have been waiting for someone to do that, and we've been playing around with stuff, but more on the hardware side than the software side. So what led you to move in that direction?
Yeah, sure. So definitely. Really with the sort of overall ecosystem, we've seen a huge sort of development on specifically the engineering front, where the people who are actually adopting using cryptocurrency are typically fundamentally tech people who are sort of used to tinkering around with code and things like that. However, because of this, we've seen a really lack of consumer adoption on like the normal everyday mom and pop interaction with blockchain, with cryptocurrency. So the underlying thesis with Mineful and sort of our tagline has been bringing mining to the masses, is that we want to focus on creating one of the first consumer adopted use cases for cryptocurrency. So outside of Coinbase or sort of like a normal wallet that people can engage with, there are very little sort of consumer experiences that are possible to experience the immediate sort of demonstrable ROI of blockchain, of crypto. So that was sort of the underlying theses that led to the development of Mineful, and our engineering team has had a much longer history of working in the mining space. So sort of the combination of expertise in blockchain as well as combined on focus on consumer adopted products has led to where we are today.
So what are the main problems you're trying to solve? Is this going to be a replacement for ads? Is this going to be more monetization for the user side, for the sales side? Are users going to be rewarded proportionally for mining as opposed to the site that's hosting it? How is that going to work?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say there are kind of two fundamental problems that we are seeking to solve. So the first one, as you got at, is the sort of advertisement-based monetization model, where many companies are struggling to monetize on the users that they've spent years and millions of dollars on actually acquiring. So that's problem A. Problem B is, again, the consumer use cases of cryptocurrency is very bare. We think that one of the things that's going to drive up sort of crypto prices and adoption is going to be making fundamentally easier to use products like Mineful. So on the first part, specifically what we're targeting is, if you look at pretty much any native desktop application, one of the hardest things that they struggle with is actually generating revenue on the users that they acquire. So if you look at Spotify, for example, in their 6K, they're making about 7 cents of profit for the 80 million free tiered users that are using Spotify every single month. 7 cents per user. Yeah. That's like, it's unbelievably low. And that's Spotify. You would think of all
Google's
of the
is much higher, but they know how to sell you much better.
Yeah, exactly. And like New York Times and people like that could be higher, but it kind of illustrates the point where if even a Spotify is struggling to monetize with their ad-based sort of channeling, then there must be a whole host of development applications that have been built that are incredible, that have these amazing sort of user bases, but actually struggle to monetize them.
So for someone who doesn't really understand mining, what is the benefit of mining? What is, how are you contributing to the ecosystem as a result of mining? What role does it play, and why is it, I guess, the most, I don't know, I guess why would you bet your horse on it as opposed to something like proof of stake or some of these other words that people are throwing around? And I've heard some really interesting acronyms recently.
Yep.
Um, so what would you say to those people?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say that fundamentally in the ecosystem right now, there is a lot of different sort of theses and strategies around the development of governance and how to actually maintain the sort of security and like variability of the blockchain. So how do you know that someone actually made this transaction? How do you like prevent double spending, et cetera? And the way that this has historically been solved is with proof of work mining. So at the sort of highest level, effectively what we're doing is utilizing your computing power to solve cryptographic puzzles, which then helps to more or less secure a blockchain. So there's a lot of different things, but basically it's a huge commodity in the space is hash power. So that's inherently what we're utilizing your computer for, is this hashing function, which then helps to solve problems, which maintains the security of the network, and oftentimes leads to price increase because it's more difficult to attack, it's less or it's more secure, etc. So in terms of specifically proof of work versus proof of stake and some of these other sort of governance strategies, there's been other strategies that have been thought about, but historically we haven't really seen anyone actually be able to have a more sort of secure, proven method than proof of work. It's what Bitcoin's on. It's what many of the really top cryptocurrencies are on, as well as the ones that we're obviously mining as well.
And so even within mining, there are segments. There's segmentation. So you have CPU mining, GPU mining,
Yep.
ASICs. So how are you guys deciding how to weigh those? Which coins to focus on? Are you giving more decision making power to the user, to the reseller? How is that going to work?
Sure. Yeah. So fundamentally, I think one of the important things to do is make the distinction between ASICs, GPU, and CPU. So the way that I like to explain it is using an analogy where imagine that there's three people in a room and I say, all right, I'm going to give all three of you a quarter. The first person who can flip 6 heads in a row, you get this prize. So that is the block reward, that prize. So inherently the CPU is the least powerful of the three in terms of computing performance for solving that problem. So it can flip it 1 time per second. The GPU, which is stronger, can flip it, say, 3 times per second. Now the ASIC is hardware that is specifically built to flip this quarter. It can flip it 1,000 times per second. So who wins that every time? The ASIC does. So fundamentally, if you are trying to mine with a CPU or a GPU in an ASIC mineable cryptocurrency, inherently you're at a huge disadvantage and your expected value is incredibly low. So it's not really a profitable business model. So what we're doing with our business model, because we're using the average PC, the average Mac, as a mining machine, we are mining cryptocurrencies that are inherently ASIC resistant, meaning there are not ASICs that can actually flip the quarter. So because of that, the CPU and the GPU are much more likely to actually be able to mine, and then thus their expected value and profitability is much higher. So getting even more into it, kind of the biggest currency that we're focused on mining is Monero.
Gotcha.
Monero,
Yeah,
I think
that's
right
what
now
I
is
was
like
gonna.
number
Yeah.
10. Yeah, it's like number 10 in market cap. It's focused on privacy, but is one of the
We're
most
actually
respected,
we're
probably
building a coin on that algorithm right now. I was actually just
on
looking into
CryptoNote.
it. Yeah, on that for the
Oh, very
last
cool.
week I've been doing all the research on it. We're trying to do dual CPU, GPU mineable. So I've been getting into
Yeah.
that, and yeah, the ASIC resistant chains definitely necessary. And within those, I think it's you can almost create the new market because it seems like people aren't creating mineable coins because they don't see the demand from miners, but there's no
Yep.
accessibility for miners. So you need to increase the pool of potential miners, and I think that increases one visibility for new coins because all of a sudden you have investors coming in who want to get a piece of it for free or before an ICO. There are a
Hmm.
lot of different strategies. So are there any, I guess, strategies that you're trying to employ? I know a lot of people have algorithms running in the background that are profit switching, profit taking.
Yep.
How are you just going to deposit it into a wallet and say, do what you wish? How's that going to work?
Yeah, sure. So you're kind of hit the nail on the head right there. So we effectively have proprietary algorithms that optimize based on the individual hash rates and network hash rates to mine the most profitable currencies. So right now we're focused mainly on CryptoNote. So there's about 22 currencies that we can more or less switch instantaneously to mine in the most profitable way. And then on the back end, what we do is we control the pooling, the proxies, we end up mining, and then we liquidate into fiat. And then at the end of the day, we have a pre-negotiated revenue cut with publishers. So the revenue, so they're basically getting fiat. Like you can think of Spotify gets paid half of whatever we mine in USD. And then the end consumer never has to touch a wallet, doesn't have to think about blockchain, doesn't have to know anything about cryptocurrency. What they're receiving is that Spotify premium for free in exchange for their computing power. So that's, again, one of our theses is we want this to be built where the average 70-year-old can take part in sort of the blockchain ecosystem by helping contribute to proof of work mining, but they don't even have to know that's what's happening. They're simply using their CPU power to receive Spotify premium for free. So that's really the way that we've thought about it and iterated it over the past year and kind of led to where we are today.
So essentially a freemium model where instead of you being the product, your computer is going to work.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, you're in the place to be. You've got Madison Avenue right down the street, and you hear, the New York Times is hemorrhaging money even when viewer numbers are going up. Yep. And they're always focused on impressions, but not really engagement. And so the interesting thing about mining, and this is a question I have, is are you going to be mining, only when you're explicitly on a website? Is that, do you think, going to encourage more engagement rather than impressions? Do you think that can change how advertisers, or I guess not necessarily advertisers, but how people start to model effective content distribution?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I'll make one quick distinction. So we are not browser-based mining.
Okay.
So the majority of browser-based mining is using CoinHive, which is an open source software, which oftentimes you see like crypto malware, cryptojacking. It's often using CoinHive. So what we're doing is we have a native level SDK that's basically implemented with native desktop applications. So because of that, we're significantly more profitable and able to access much more of your computing power than anything browser-based. So at least the way it is at the moment, it's not a very profitable business model for the New York Times to be mining via their website. Now,
I see.
The way that we have architected basically our product offerings is it's kind of twofold. So one is imagine like a Spotify, anytime that it's running on your computer at the native SDK level, it can be sitting there mining. All right, but what happens when you close your Spotify? If it's implemented at the SDK level, then anytime the app is closed, we no longer are accessing our computing power and you're no longer mining. Now, how we can solve that is if a user wants to continue mining, we effectively have the functionality to create a white label application that would sit at the top of like your Mac toolbar or your Windows toolbar. So it could be simply always running there, like right next to the Bluetooth Wi-Fi kind of code, and it could be running 24 hours a day where you would have the functionality of deciding when to turn it on, when to turn it off, and it's inherently connected to your account, generating money for your Spotify, for your Netflix, whatever that premium product might be.
And that's also going to make it much less likely that you'll get booted off because Google implements some new extension regulation or Apple decides on some. So that's been, I think, a big problem with a lot of people trying to move CPU mining into the mainstream is there are a lot of people worried about. And I've been building miners in my garage, and I can't tell you how many times it's almost, pretty much burn the place down because I've had 10 different viruses running on that thing at a time, just testing different softwares and, wiping that thing every couple of days because it just gets, destroyed with all the malware that gets passed on. So I guess what would be some of the best use cases that you can think of other than a company like Spotify? So are you going to approach bigger consumer companies? Are you starting to make partnerships with these companies? Or are you just seeing who comes to you? What's your strategy to get this out there?
Yeah, sure. So kind of talking through our go-to-market and kind of end strategy. So the goal obviously is to be implemented with some of these major publishers. So a Spotify, a Slack, a Zoom, inherently companies that have premium products, but also massive user bases that they're struggling to monetize. So there's sort of two ways, because obviously you can't immediately launch with a Spotify. It's taking iterations and some proof of concept before we can really prove it out for them. So we've taken two different approaches. The first one being identifying similar companies to Spotify that are on a much smaller scale and are similarly struggling to monetize. So specifically, one of the verticals that we're looking at is the gaming industry. So one of like the ideal
Yeah,
companies
that's
we'd
an
love to
excellent
work with,
one to be with.
obviously, is yeah. So a company like Epic Games would be incredible, where we could be sitting there mining anyone who's playing Fortnite. So
Yeah, get some
we've
real V-Bucks.
exactly. So the way that we're targeting this is one, we're implementing with some fairly big gaming companies in the 500,000 to 1 million users, but actually something that we're launching in the next 2 weeks is actually a battle pass generator specifically for Fortnite. So it's
Really?
not,
That's neat.
yeah, so it's not going
Very
to be
smart.
integrated with Epic Games. However, it's going to be like a standalone application that again would sit there and run in your Mac toolbar. It's mining, as you called it. We're generating V-Bucks. You as the user are generating like the new season, the new battle pass for Fortnite. So our targeted strategy is combining some of these smaller gaming publishers with 500,000 users, then the more or less like white label direct to consumer application saying, hey, we have 50,000 miners who are specifically mining for the new battle pass, and then taking that towards Epic Games and saying, hey, this makes a lot of sense to implement at the SDK level because you're going to make significantly more money than a lot of your other revenue monetization schemes. So that's kind of our business approach in terms of the way we've been thinking about it. And again, so we'll be launching the battle pass generator. Should be going live actually next week or so. So it should be pretty cool.
Well, you'll have to let me know. I'll definitely be downloading that one.
Definitely.
And with, so I guess you're talking about, having one computer maybe, but with all these IoT products and more sophisticated processors going into them, do you ever see a point where, your Apple Home kit or whatever might be mining and your light bulb that's connected to Wi-Fi might be? Do you think as we add more processors to more things, we might just essentially put them to work in the interim to do these sorts of processes?
Oh, absolutely. And that's something that we've actually worked a little bit on is how would you basically mine on ARM processors on mobile phones? We've seen kind of several instances in the past few months of being able to mine on Wi-Fi, being able to mine on like a couple other IoT type devices. So really, I foresee it being a huge part of the ecosystem in the next 2 to 5 years, really. But kind of that goes aligned with our goal, where any given household probably has 10 plus connected devices that can all be mining towards these premium products. So if you could be mining $100, $200 a month with the 20 devices in your household and be getting basically all the premium products that you typically pay for free, that's an incredibly powerful business model that consumers will love.
Yeah, absolutely. And so on the developer side, I read something about it being, open source. And so how are you approaching that? Because a lot of people are building platforms for developers. Everyone wants their DApp ecosystem. Are you trying to crowdsource some of the development or some of the specifics to the programming? How are you going about that?
Yeah, so we're using some open source software specifically on the mining side. So like XMR Stack is one, JCE Miner is another one that are kind of the top open source distributed mining software for crypto now. The specific like implementation of the SDK, of our APIs, etc., are not open source, but are going to be closed source. But what we're trying to do is basically develop an ecosystem where anyone can take our technology and basically utilize and build miners off of it. So one of the ideas and something that we're thinking about in like the next iteration is you could think of it like a WordPress miner where you want to raise money for your daughter's, Girl Scouts cookies. So all you have to do is drag a logo for Girl Scouts, then you distribute it to all the moms and dads at your school. They run on their computer and they help your daughter like mine Monero to then buy Girl Scout cookies. So we have all the technology and the functionality. It's just in the roadmap, basically doing that. But it's similar to like a GoFundMe crowdsource based business model, but obviously building that next technology layer on top of it.
And it's like, what's more fun than free money? You would think it would be a really attractive opportunity to people who, people love buying lottery tickets. They love, they love gambling. It's one of the best ways to get into the system without having to spend a lot of money or risk a lot. And so that's one of the reasons why we really like to focus on it. So do you think more mining will be done on, I guess, average user, like the average laptop, or do you think there's going to be things like the eGPUs that you can hook into your Mac, and they might make, mining specific eGPUs that you can plug in someday. Do you think it might go to a more specialized route with miners, especially in CPU and GPU, if you can make it, if you can get it to that point?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could. But I think if you think about the ethos behind so many of these blockchain projects, like what is the buzzword that always comes out? Like decentralized. So if you really want a decentralized group of users that are helping your overall ecosystem, you want to make that barrier to entry as low as possible. So to the extent that you could mine on an iPhone or an Apple Watch or a MacBook Air, that is inherently more decentralized towards the overall project concept.
Oh,
So,
absolutely, yeah.
so I foresee, and you actually can look at trends, there's a lot more ASIC resistant currencies that are coming out,
Hmm.
even people that are focusing on CPU only. I'm sure that it's going to be moving into IoT only as well, because of that inherent sort of ethos behind it. Um, I'm sure that there are going to be some technical difficulties that sort of force people to actually have potential add-ons and things over time. And obviously, you have to deal with Bitmain trying to break into Monero and some of these other currencies. But
Yeah.
I think that over time, it's just software is so much easier to develop and on a much quicker scale that I think there will inherently always be some level of decentralized currencies that can be mined profitably. And I think we'll see that trend actually increase over time.
And that was another point I was going to make. I mean, if you did this successfully, you could almost operate as a Federal Reserve of sorts if you do have algorithms in the background picking coins. So, how would, I guess, coins in the background, do you think, start to compete for market share? Do you think there would be more incentives for users? There'd be more aggressive incentives for
Mm-hmm.
users to mine specific coins? Because if you go into mining pools and you play around with that software, they're really not focused on incentivizing anyone, or there's no
Right.
marketing really pushing you in any direction. But theoretically, you would think that big billion-dollar companies would want to encourage people to start mining their currency, join their network, get some sort of piece of the pie, essentially. So do you think that might become more prevalent with
Yeah, I
time?
mean, it definitely could. And if you think about kind of our business model, we really have one of the commodities in the space that is hash power. With all these ICOs, a lot of these kind of early tokens have a ton of liquidity, have a ton of cash on hand, but they're struggling to get user hash power, which is then really hurting their project to develop. So I've had several early currencies reach out to me saying, "Hey, if you help mine, help develop our ecosystem, like we'll give you XYZ in terms of like additional deals on top of the actual like more tokens."
Hmm.
So because of that, what I do see is over time, as we have more miners, as we have more hash power, it's basically going to create like a competitive effect where different currencies are going to try to strike deals with us, which will inherently make those currencies more profitable to mine. And then simultaneously, we will help develop that ecosystem, which should also help those coins grow. So we actually see it as very much a partnership between us and a lot of these early stage currencies that we feel comfortable mining to help really develop sort of that relationship.
And I mean, like you said, there really aren't a ton on CryptoNote. I mean, maybe 20 big ones, not a ton yet. So it seems like you could create the growth market if you did it correctly and
Yep.
encouraged enough people to do it, which I think is exciting because I don't think a lot of people have been focused on that part of the equation, which is one of the most important parts to get right if you really want to decentralize things. And it is incredibly centralized. So I guess I think it'd be awesome if maybe you could talk about some of the centralization that has occurred from your perspective, and why you think that might be bad, or maybe 51% attacks if you have
Mm-hmm.
anything to say about stuff like that, because these are all factored in and these are all things that not a lot of people hear about nearly as much as the other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you inherently look at who's holding a lot of these major currencies, and more specifically, who's mining a
Yeah.
lot of the top currencies, it's always Bitmain, it's Canaan, it's the huge miners who have raised hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars
Yeah.
to create specialized hardware to
See
specifically mine
how much
currencies.
Bitcoin Cash Bitmain is holding on to, and then
Yep,
pump and dumping it with all the reporters pushing articles about how it's the future.
right, exactly. So because of that, you are inherently, as an investor in that currency, you are inherently exposed to risks associated with like private companies more or less manipulating price and mining for their own gain. So there's a lot of risk to the average consumer with kind of trusting Bitmain or trusting Canaan that they're not going to tank Bcash because they pumped and dumped it. So
Yeah.
because of that, I think there's been a lot of pushback on Bitmain, really with their relationship with Bitcoin Cash as well. Um, but because of that, I think that we're going to see more focus on trying to create more decentralized ecosystems where you're not having basically monopolies or oligarchies that are ruling what's supposed to be a decentralized ecosystem.
Yeah, and eventually, having things like voting rights. I mean, the miners really do run the show at the end of the day because they're voting with their hash power, essentially,
Exactly.
sort of like voting with your dollar power. Which is, if you have that as decentralized as you can extrapolate it to be, then every person does have a sort of vote, and that's almost as powerful as being a shareholder, which is. I think it's being a shareholder, but also contributing, so more than a shareholder, really.
Right.
And so, have you guys just been working on this sort of as like, small group of guys? Is this a big effort? Are you guys, tackling trying to do an ICO, going the VC route?
Mm-hmm.
How are you tackling that question, I guess? Some people don't like to talk about it. Some people are like, "No, don't tell them we raised this much money."
Yeah, yeah.
But whatever you want to say.
Sure. Yeah. So, one, we're not doing an ICO. We are
Yeah.
vehemently avoiding the whole token madness and
Yeah, it's
securities
rough out
issues,
there,
how we test,
especially in New
etc.
York.
Yeah, we are, especially being in New York. You're right. We're 100% avoiding that because there's not
Larry
really any
Sharp, though, we
space.
had him on last a couple weeks ago. The New
Mm-hmm.
York governor candidate, great guy for crypto,
Wow.
awesome
Very
ideas.
cool. Very
Yeah,
cool.
but
Yeah, so we're not doing an ICO. We're in the process of actually closing our seed round at the moment. Actually, just got back from a big investor meeting, so everything's good on that front. In terms
awesome.
of our team, we have 12 employees at the moment. We have me, we have our CFO, COO, general counsel, we have a CTO, chief enterprise architect, and then a couple developers in France and Russia and sort of around the world. So our team has been growing quickly. We really launched the project kind of December, January, and there's been a slow sort of attrition of gaining more people continually better and smarter than the next. So
Yeah.
it's been really cool to see kind of where our team has started and really is where it is today.
So, what would you tell someone who wanted to get started with some of your products? Because I was trying to, go online, and I guess it's mostly focused towards business partners right now.
Sure.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
So right now, I would say wait like a week, wait 2 weeks for
Okay.
where Battle Pass Generator will be out. Anyone can download it. Whether you like Fortnite or not, you can see the experience of mining. It's going to be VBucks, so really you could use it for anything that you can buy VBucks for, which is a ton of different stuff. But so I would say that is kind of my first step, and then the second is we're on Twitter, we're on Medium, we're on a lot of different things where you could follow. So when we actually announce some of these bigger partnerships that we're in integration with right now, you'll be able to see and start using the actual native implementation alongside some of our partners.
Well, that's really exciting for everyone listening, and I think we're gonna have to take a look at some of your open source stuff and play around with it a little bit if we can.
Definitely.
Let's see. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on before we wrap up here? I mean, I know you guys have a lot. I mean, a lot of interesting stuff. I know you have a lot of sort of coming soon type products. Cloud mining. I guess you could maybe talk a little bit about cloud mining, how that might work.
Sure, yeah. So we actually started with cloud mining, where our engineering team had a different company and were given a couple $100,000 of AWS credits. And with those
Yeah.
AWS credits, we're like, wow, what could we do with this? Oh, this cryptocurrency thing is interesting. And that was like 18 months ago. And with that, we've had several $100,000 of, we like to think of a R&D experience of sort of thinking
Yeah.
about architecting, building, optimizing hash rates based on like different cloud instances. So we have kind of the functionality to really mine in the cloud. Sometimes it's actually profitable to just buy like AWS and then mine it, but it really depends on the market rates and the sort of volatility of the network hash rates as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And yeah, there have been a lot of cloud mining companies that I think have scared people off as well. So,
Yep.
but pairing it with a lot of legitimate offerings, I think it helps
Definitely,
tremendously.
definitely, and it's kind of a tertiary product offering where a lot of these businesses have massive sort of clouds that they pay for and that are unused. Where, say, for example, a VPN might have to launch an AWS instance anytime they get a new client. Well, if that new client churns or leaves, now that they're just sitting there on these cloud credits, so how can they think about recouping some of their losses and monetizing it? So that's the way we've thought about it, as like a horizontal product offering alongside our main core business, which is the SDK implementation. But it's interesting because it's obviously very, very similar in terms of just using computing power to just generate cryptocurrency.
Well, I think it's time to let your computer start going to work for you because I think it's about time where we don't need to be doing as much.
Definitely.
It'd be a wonderful world if your computer just woke up every day and earned you a living.
Exactly. That's the
Or at
dream.
least got you all your favorite stuff, you know,
Yep.
get you the basics. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I encourage you guys to check out their website, mindful.com. I'll have all the links in the description, and I believe it's at Mindful on Twitter
Yep.
and Instagram. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll be back soon with another episode on the 8th. Thanks, guys.